It was a Thursday evening when I received the call that would change my life, or rather, my nights, forever. I had just finished dinner and was settling in for a quiet evening at home when my phone rang. I glanced at the caller ID and saw it was my boss, Mr. Harris. I answered with a mix of curiosity and apprehension. "Hello?" I said, trying to keep the fatigue out of my voice. "Good evening, John," came Mr. Harris's smooth, authoritative tone. "I hope I'm not catching you at a bad time." "Not at all," I replied, though a small part of me wished I had let the call go to voicemail. "I'll get straight to the point," Mr. Harris continued. "As you know, we've been expanding our operations, and with that expansion comes the need for increased security. I'm offering you the position of night shift supervisor." I felt a mix of surprise and trepidation at the offer. The idea of working nights wasn't exactly appealing, but the thought of a promotion and a bump in salary was enough to pique my interest. "Wow, that's unexpected," I said, struggling to find the right words. "But I'm definitely interested. What would the job entail?" Mr. Harris went on to explain the details of the position: patrolling the office building, monitoring security cameras, and ensuring that everything ran smoothly during the night hours. It sounded straightforward enough, but there was an underlying sense of unease that I couldn't shake. After mulling it over for a few moments, I accepted the offer. Little did I know this decision would lead me down a path I never could have imagined. My first night on the job was an exercise in tedium. Armed with a flashlight and a walkie-talkie, I patrolled the empty corridors of the office building, my footsteps echoing in the stillness of the night. The building itself was a towering monolith of glass and steel, its sleek exterior belying the dark secrets that lay within. During the day, it buzzed with the energy of productivity, but at night it took on a sinister atmosphere that sent shivers down my spine. As I made my rounds, I couldn't shake the feeling that I was being watched. Every shadow seemed to pulse with a malevolent energy, every creak of the floorboards a harbinger of something sinister lurking just out of sight. I tried to push aside my fears, telling myself it was just my imagination running wild in the darkness. But deep down, I knew it was something more, something primal and instinctual that whispered of unseen dangers lurking in the shadows. As the hours passed, I found myself growing more and more on edge. Every sound, every movement seemed to set my nerves on edge, until I was jumping at the slightest noise. It wasn't until the early hours of the morning that things took a turn for the worse. As I made my way through the deserted corridors, I heard a strange noise, a soft, plaintive wailing that sent a chill down my spine. I froze in place, my heart pounding in my chest as I strained to locate the source of the sound. It seemed to be coming from the direction of the conference room, a dimly lit space at the end of the hallway. With a sense of trepidation, I approached the door and pushed it open, the hinges squeaking in protest. What I saw inside made my blood run cold. Conference room was bathed in an eerie blue light, the walls lined with rows of empty chairs and a long table covered in dust. But it wasn't the emptiness of the room that sent a shiver down my spine. It was what I saw standing at the far end. There, in the corner of the room, stood a figure, a woman by the looks of it. Her back turned to me as she gazed out the window. She was dressed in a tattered gown that hung loosely from her skeletal frame, her hair long and unkempt. For a moment I hesitated, unsure of what to do. But then, with a sense of determination, I stepped further into the room, my footsteps echoing in the silence. "Excuse me?" I said, my voice trembling slightly. "Are you all right?" The woman didn't respond, didn't even acknowledge my presence. She just stood there, unmoving, as if lost in some deep, dark reverie. I took another step forward, my hand reaching out instinctively towards her. But as I drew closer, I noticed something strange, a chill in the air, a sense of foreboding that seemed to hang over the room like a shroud. And then, just as suddenly as it had started, the woman turned, her face illuminated by the soft glow of the moonlight streaming in through the window. I recoiled in horror, my blood turning to ice in my veins. The woman's face was twisted and contorted, her eyes empty and lifeless, her mouth stretched into a grotesque smile that sent a chill down my spine. Before I could react, the lights flickered and went out, plunging the conference room into darkness. Panic clawed at my chest as I fumbled for the flashlight on my belt. my hands shaking with fear. And then, just as suddenly as it had started, the darkness lifted, the lights flickering back to life as if nothing had happened. But the woman was gone, vanished into thin air like a specter in the night. I stumbled backwards, my heart pounding in my chest as I fled from the conference room, my footsteps echoing in the empty halls. I didn't stop running until I reached the safety of the security office, where I collapsed into a chair, gasping for breath. What had I just witnessed? Was it some kind of hallucination brought on by exhaustion and stress? Or had I truly stumbled upon something dark and malevolent lurking in the shadows of the office? As I sat there trying to catch my breath, I couldn't shake the feeling that I had just scratched the surface of something much larger and much more sinister than I could ever have imagined. And as the night stretched on, I knew that my journey into the heart of darkness was far from over. The next day, I couldn't shake the feeling of unease that lingered in the back of my mind. The encounter in the conference room had shaken me to my core, leaving me with more questions than answers. I tried to focus on my work, burying myself in spreadsheets and reports, but the memory of the woman's twisted face haunted me like a specter in the night. I knew I had to find out more, to uncover the truth behind the strange occurrences that seemed to plague the office after hours. With a sense of determination, I set out to investigate, scouring the internet for any information that might shed light on the building's dark past. What I found was more disturbing than I could have ever imagined. According to local legend, the office building had once been the site of a psychiatric hospital, where patients deemed too dangerous or too unstable to be housed in traditional facilities were locked away in the bowels of the building. Rumors of abuse and neglect ran rampant, with stories of patients disappearing without a trace and strange occurrences plaguing the staff. And then, one fateful night, the hospital had burned to the ground, leaving nothing behind but ashes and whispers of the horrors that had once taken place within its walls. I felt a chill run down my spine as I read the accounts, the pieces of the puzzle falling into place with a sickening sense of inevitability. The woman in the conference room, the strange noises in the night. It all made sense now. The office building was haunted, cursed by the restless spirits of those who had suffered and died within its walls. But why had I been chosen to bear witness to their torment? And what did they want from me? As the sun dipped below the horizon and the shadows lengthened, I knew that I had only scratched the surface of the horrors that lay hidden within the heart of the office building. And as I prepared to face another night alone in the darkness, I couldn't shake the feeling that the worst was yet to come. The nights that followed were a blur of terror and uncertainty. Every shadow seemed to pulse with a malevolent energy, every creak of the floorboards a harbinger of something sinister lurking just out of sight. I tried to push aside my fears, telling myself it was just my imagination running wild in the darkness. But deep down, I knew it was something more, something primal and instinctual that whispered of unseen dangers lurking in the shadows. As the days turned into weeks, the haunting grew more intense. Strange noises echoed through the halls, and objects seemed to move of their own accord. I would find papers scattered across my desk or chairs overturned in the conference room, with no explanation as to how they got there. But the most chilling aspect of all was the feeling of being watched. Everywhere I went, I could feel eyes boring into the back of my skull, their gaze filled with a malevolent intent that sent a shiver down my spine. I tried to tell myself it was just my imagination, that there was a rational explanation for everything that was happening. But deep down, I knew it was something more, something ancient and unknowable that defied all logic and reason. And then, one fateful night, the spirits made their presence known in a way I could never have imagined. It started innocently enough. A group of colleagues gathered together in the security office, trying to make sense of the strange occurrences that seemed to plague the building after hours. But what began as a simple discussion soon escalated into something far more sinister. As we sat in a circle, our hands joined together, a sense of anticipation hung in the air like a heavy fog. I could feel the hairs on the back of my neck standing on end as the room grew cold, the temperature dropping several degrees in a matter of seconds. And then, with a suddenness that took my breath away, the room was filled with a blinding light, illuminating the faces of my colleagues in stark relief. I blinked, trying to adjust to the brightness. But when I opened my eyes again, I was met with a sight that blood run cold. Standing at the center of the circle was the woman from the conference room, her twisted face contorted in a grotesque mask of pain and rage. Her eyes burned with a malevolent light as she spoke, her voice a whisper that seemed to come from everywhere and nowhere at once. "Leave this place," she said, her words echoing in the silence. "You do not belong here. Leave before it's too late." I tried to speak, to ask her what she wanted from me, but no words would come. I could only sit there paralyzed with fear, as the spirit of the woman reached out towards me with ghostly fingers. And then, just as suddenly as it had started, the light faded, leaving me alone in the darkness of the security office. My colleagues were gone, vanished into thin air like specters in the night. I stumbled backwards, my heart pounding in my chest as I fled from the security office, my footsteps echoing in the empty halls. I didn't stop running until I reached the safety of the elevator, where I collapsed into a heap, gasping for breath. As the elevator descended, carrying me away from the horrors of the night, I knew that I could never return to that cursed place again. The office building was haunted, cursed by the restless spirits of those who had suffered and died within its walls. And as I stepped out into the cool night air, I vowed never to forget the horrors I had witnessed, and to warn others of the dangers that lurked within the heart of the midnight office. The office at night was a desolate place, devoid of the usual hustle and bustle that filled its corridors during the day. As the clock struck midnight, I found myself alone, surrounded by the eerie silence of the empty cubicles and flickering fluorescent lights. Little did I know, this night would become a waking nightmare. I had decided to work late to finish up a project that was already behind schedule. With a looming deadline, I couldn't afford to waste any time. But as the hours ticked by, a sense of unease settled over me like a suffocating blanket. It started with a faint sound, a soft thud coming from somewhere in the depths of the office. I brushed it off as my imagination playing tricks on me, the result of too many late nights and too much caffeine. But then it happened again, louder this time, followed by the unmistakable sound of footsteps echoing through the empty halls. I froze, my heart pounding in my chest as I strained to listen for any sign of movement. The footsteps grew closer, closer, until they were right outside my door. I held my breath, waiting for whoever, or whatever, was lurking in the darkness to reveal themselves. And then, without warning, the door burst open, and a group of masked figures stormed into the room. My blood ran cold as I realized what was happening. A robbery. I watched in horror as the intruders ransacked the office, flipping over desks, tearing through cabinets, searching for anything of value. I knew I should have called the police, but fear rooted me to the spot, rendering me incapable of action. One of the masked men caught sight of me and advanced, his eyes gleaming with malice. I stumbled backward, my heart racing as he loomed over me, a silent threat hanging in the air. "Where's the money?" he growled, his voice low and menacing. I shook my head, my throat dry with fear. "I don't know," I stammered. "I'm just an employee." He scoffed and turned away, his attention drawn to something else in the room. I took the opportunity to slip away, darting into the shadows as quietly as I could manage. I crouched behind a row of filing cabinets, my heart pounding in my ears as I listened to the chaos unfolding around me. The robber seemed more interested in valuables than causing harm, but I knew I couldn't stay hidden forever. Summoning every ounce of courage I had left, I crept toward the emergency exit, my movements slow and deliberate. But just as I reached for the door handle, a hand clamped down on my shoulder, sending a jolt of terror coursing through my veins. I turned to face my attacker, expecting to see one of the masked men. But instead, I found myself staring into the eyes of a co-worker I had thought was on vacation. "Thank God I found you," she whispered, her voice trembling with fear. "We need to get out of here before they find us." I nodded, relief flooding through me as I realized I wasn't alone. Together, we slipped out the emergency exit and into the cool night air, leaving behind the nightmare of the office robbery. As we watched from a safe distance, the police arrived, sirens blaring, to apprehend the thieves. And as the first light of dawn broke over the horizon, I knew that the horrors of the night would eventually fade into memory, leaving behind only a lingering sense of unease and the knowledge that sometimes the darkness holds more than just shadows.